By Chinook to Chequers, symbolism as much as security, the verdant fields of Buckinghamshire are somewhat less treacherous than the battlefields of Donetsk. And then the meeting of the brothers in arms and a tour of the gardens. Rishi Sunak is keen to retain Britain's position as second only to the US in providing weapons to Ukraine. Britain doesn't have the F-16 fighter jets President Zelenskyy says he needs, but has agreed to train pilots for a new jets coalition, with several countries providing different aspects of air power.
Today we spoke about the jets, very important topic for us, because we can't control the sky, you know it. So I think you know everything deeply, because we're real partners. Rishi knows all the details, what's going on our battlefield. Thank you very much. And we want to create this jets coalition, and I'm very positive with it.
The Prime Minister said that Britain would provide Ukraine with long-range drones and more air defences, as well as the long-range Storm Shadow missiles announced last week.
I'm pleased we're the first country to be able to do that, and I'm pleased that they will make a difference to the defence of Ukraine, and we will keep providing support, as you've seen today, with long-range offensive drones, for example, more anti-aircraft, and there will be further support to come, and that's what we've been talking about today. But I think it's important for the Kremlin to also know that we're not going away.
The Storm Shadow cruise missile has a range of about 150 miles, but the British say it won't be used to attack Russia itself. It's fired from an aircraft and could, however, be used against targets in the parts of Ukraine Russia occupies. The Russians say one was used on Friday, which they claim injured 6 children.
On
May the 12th, around 18:30 Moscow time, battle planes of the Ukrainian Air Force carried out an airstrike on polymer production plant Polypak and meat processing plant Milan in Luhansk. For this strike, Storm Shadow missiles were used that had been supplied to the Kyiv regime by Great Britain, despite London's declarations that they would not be used against civilian targets.
The Russians also say that Ukrainian forces killed a senior official while he was having his hair cut in Luhansk, and that 2 senior commanders have been killed in recent days. Ukrainian forces continue to attack Russian positions, but say they can't start their full counter-offensive until they get more Western weapons. President Zelenskyy has been on a European shopping trip. The Germans promised a new package of military aid worth nearly €3 billion. France will send light tanks and armoured vehicles. The Italians promised to support Ukraine's EU membership. But as President Zelenskyy said goodbye to the Prime Minister this afternoon, he knows that however much weaponry Ukraine receives, every day's delay before the new counter-offensive is another day the Russians can use to dig in and defend the Ukrainian territory they've taken.
Well, the Ukrainian MP Lesia Vasylenko joins me now. Lesia Vasylenko, at the end of this European tour by your president, do you feel that your European allies, including the UK, have committed enough weaponry to really change the course of the war or not?
I guess we'll see in the days and weeks to come how much these pledges will materialize into actual weapons on the ground. But you're absolutely right in saying that every day delay gives Russia more of an advantage and delays our victory. And our victory, not just the Ukrainian victory, but overall global victory. I can say for democracy quite confidently, although it may sound like an abstract concept, but really it's peace that we're all after. And that peace will only be possible if victory is brought to Ukraine.
And when you say you'll have to see whether the pledges actually translate into delivery of weapons, there sounds to be a certain scepticism based perhaps on the delays of recent months. Is that right?
Well, the best case was the tanks, and for how long Ukraine has been asking for the tanks to be delivered from all the different countries. And it's actually thanks to the UK who delivered the first 2 Challengers that things started moving, and that the US conceded to giving us the tanks, that the Germans have finally delivered the Leopards. So again, we are looking here to the UK, with our president being here today in the UK and asking Rishi Sunak for help with the solution to the fighter jets problem.
I mean, that jets coalition that your president talks about, do you believe it will happen? Because there's been a lot of talk by NATO countries for months now about supplying jets.
Well, that's my skepticism. That's where it's coming from. There's been a lot of talk, and I think every single minister of defense in Europe and in the States knows that for Ukraine to have the considerable advantage, we need the fighter jets up there in the skies, shooting down the Russian missiles and able to protect Ukrainian civilians, but also Ukrainian military targets within the territory of Ukraine. However, there's still the talk, and there's still no action. So we are very keen, very eager to see those fighter jets in Ukraine.
So how soon do you think you could see off Putin if you had everything that you're asking for?
I think the target would be by the end of fall this year. I mean, going into another winter in a full-time war with Russia bombarding our energy infrastructure and our civilian targets, that's a no-go. That's a no-go for Ukraine and a no-go for all the countries supporting Ukraine, because economically the war is also strenuous, apart from the fact that, of course, every day it's taking lives, every day it's taking tens of innocent lives.
And if the war doesn't end this year, what does that mean for Ukraine, for Europe, for the world?
Well, for Ukraine, it means that we just keep on fighting. We've been fighting for 10 years, a good decade, and we'll just carry on for as long as it takes. And I'm just very hoping that our partners, including the UK, will fight alongside us for as long as it takes.
Lesia Vasylenko, thank you very much for joining us. Well, Hamish de Bretton-Gordon is a former British Army colonel and military expert, and he joins me now from Salisbury. Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, the UK appears to be promising a whole shopping list of weaponry and defence materiel. Does it all add up? I mean, there's been some suggestion, for example, that we don't have the capability for the long-range attack drones that are being pledged.
I think the UK can be really proud of the way that we've led the way with the Challenger 2 tanks, which then encouraged the Germans and others to follow suit, with Storm Shadow, the precision-guided missile that really could be a game changer. So encouraging the other members of the coalition to support is absolutely key. It's no good having missiles on the shelf next year, because I agree, this war has got to be won this year. Otherwise, I expect the Americans and the French and some others might well start focusing on other things.
Right.
The aircraft issue is key, but I think this is really as a deterrent. So I'm hoping that next year, when they get the aircraft, that will be to deter any Russia incursion back in, hopefully on the prospect that they will be pushed out this year.
Right, so you said there about, the leadership position of the UK. The coalition is not really following, is it, necessarily? You haven't quite got the backup from the rest of Europe. What needs to change there, in your view?
Well, I think Europe really needs to look at this. This is the most important thing that is facing Europe at the moment. Russia, I think, is teetering on the edge. They've suffered tremendous casualties, and I think tomorrow we're going to hear of even more casualties. They have virtually no precision weapons left. We have now enabled Ukraine to be able to strike deep, cut off all the logistics supplies, and with the tanks that we and the Germans and others have provided, and the training, and they've all done it in secret. Their operational security is brilliant. I have no idea when they're going to attack and what timing and where in particular. And if I don't know, I'm pretty sure the Russians don't either.
Right,
but Europe needs to get behind it absolutely fully. Otherwise, we could get into next year and this could drag on and on and on.
There's a very real worry, though, isn't there, that the more we promise and the more we supply, the deeper we get drawn into it, the bigger the risk of Putin using chemical or battlefield nuclear weapons.
Well, I don't want to sound like Michael Fish, but I do not think there is any way that Putin can use his nuclear weapons. He has threatened nuclear weapons since the get-go, and they've had absolutely the opposite result. NATO has got heavily involved. Finland has joined NATO, the most powerful army in Europe, and everybody, or most people, are supplying the weapons that Ukraine needs. So I think That is a busted flush now, which I'm delighted. On the chemical issue, there is a possibility, and I would like to hear Western leaders be a bit more demonstrative, saying that that really would cross a red line and we would do something about it. I think Putin is really, really struggling to escalate, which is why I think now, with Putin on the ropes, you know, the coalition, ourselves, and supported by everybody else, needs to put in the sucker punch to end this by the autumn, as your previous person mentioned, so that we can get some sort of peace in this part of the world.
Isn't there a terrible possibility that the reason why people are being evacuated from around the Zaporizhia plant is because Putin may be contemplating some kind of awful atrocity there?
You're right. That is a real concern, and I think it is the most likely potential nuclear threat, turning Zaporizhia nuclear power station into a sort of improvised nuclear device. And I don't want to sound trite or dismiss it, but I think whatever they do, whatever happens at Zaporizhia, if there is some accident, some fire, some explosion, you know, the radiation is very unlikely to be like Chernobyl and spread across Europe. So I have called, with many others, that the UN should get involved, demilitarized zone around Zaporizhia as soon as we can. I'm sure Ukraine would back that up, so that potential to create this dreadful accident is removed. But I still think that it is unlikely to cause a massive damage like Chernobyl was.
Hamish de Bretton Gordon, thanks very much.